when a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Okay, so today would actually start with Daily Trust newspaper, and we have a few headlines on the front page. And the lead here says, why fuel scarcity persists in Abuja and northern states. And writers that say vehicle owners sleep at filling stations, Russia-Ukraine war slows product importation, says official, and only affordable diesel will bring respite, says marketers. Right at the top, we have 10 dangerous criminal sports to be wary of in Abuja and also in Lagos in page 3. And then on COVID-19, federal government cancels pre-travel PCR test for vaccinated international travelers, finally. Yeah, there's a pictorial there of traffic snarl, caused by a long fuel queue along Buhari Duse Road in Abuja. And right beside that pictorial, you have defection. 20 Cross River lawmakers sacked. Umahi's stay of execution struck out. You also have why many households still lack water. That's celebrating a World Water Day, which is today. That's attributed to the minister. And APC yet to screen aspirants 4 days to convention. Now, below that pictorial, you have 24 killed, several houses burned in renewed southern Kaduna hostilities, and bandits kill village head, 19 others in fresh attacks.
Quite tragic. Well, today we're going to be looking at the papers quite differently. We're going to be highlighting some of the stories and reviewing them at the same time. We have Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust, Sunday Michael, here with us to take a look at some of the stories. Welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Listen, I remember yesterday, I think you sent some pictures and videos, to the office WhatsApp group, about these the attacks in Kaduna State. 24 killed, several houses burnt. It's been a while we saw this coming from Kaduna, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I think what we know of is the fact that some of these attacks have been happening underground. Maybe the numbers are not as alarming, but even if it's one life, clearly that's important. But I think it's something the government need to move quickly to nip in the bud, because that attack has a tradition of reprisals. So every other person that comes to attack tells you it is happening because they have lost some persons to the attack from the other side. What we are not sure of is whether they actually carry out reprisals on people who attack them, or they just basically hit another community, which then wakes up and hit, another community. But it's really sad that this is still happening. That part of the country has suffered serious losses as a result of communal clashes, and I hope, and really wish that there is something, a community-led initiative that can really nip this in the bud. If you travel around that axis, what you see as relics of what has been going on there for the last 20 years is something you don't wish for anywhere.
Okay, now this particular attack actually happened in the evening, and security forces actually had all night to move in, and secure the area. And there are reports that even when the community, that's the residents, actually came back home the following morning, they were still attacked. There was a second attack. So, I don't know. Do you think the security forces are actually proactive?
If you do a content analysis of most of the attacks that have happened in this part of the world, especially down southern Kaduna, it always happened in the evening. And painfully, as with this narrative, you would not get intervention until the next day. And that's a whopping long time. Supposing, for instance, an attack begins by 8 p.m. or 9, and you start putting out calls and you don't get a response to 8 p.m. the next day, that's 12 hours. And somehow it does appear that these attackers have become accustomed to the fact that there will be no security response, so it lasts as long as the one. They carry out maximum damage, before they move on. And these are some of the things, that have bred some of the suspicion, by onlookers that, it does appear that sometimes the security outfits are culpable, or when it comes to attack, because you don't understand why all kinds of help. Sometimes sitting in Abuja, for some of us who are media people, you get all kinds of SOS text messages. This place is being attacked. We are under attack. We are under attack. You also try to rebroadcast the same messages, hoping, that some persons in high places will see them and act on it. But you get to hear that nothing happens until the next day. And I mean, what better time to carry out evil attack than when it is in the dark? So they can do whatever they want and disappear into the fringes without anybody, being able to stop them.
Following that attack yesterday, the governor imposed a 24-hour curfew in that part, of the country. But do you think this is going to in any way curb anything?
Like I said, the scripts are the same. The attack happened, no intervention by the military, and then the next morning what we hear is a curfew. The idea is to actually stop the community that have been attacked, stop the rage from the community spilling into another and then degenerating into something, which is a good thing, but it would have been best. And that was why I talked about a community-led approach. These people are not spirits, and there is no how, for instance, you could finish an attack by 4 a.m. and you can disappear so far away, so they could cordon off places and try to arrest the situation. And if it's something that we would need dialogue beyond just military intervention, we must begin that process of healing, that process of resolving this conflict once and all, because it's not something we can continue to live in for the rest of our lives. I know even within a newsroom of a colleague who is from that part of the world, and every time you talk about returning home or the rest, he tells you he has not been home in 5 years because he doesn't want to be caught in the web. As a matter of fact, the day the mother hears he's attempting to come home, she would just lose it. And the best bet for him is they have a phone conversation, whatever he has to support his family, he does that from a distance, and they think he's safer being here. But how long would that continue? That's him. He probably would have a family. And if you continue like that, that is an entire generation cutting off from their root. It's not sustainable.
Well, some people actually, or most people in Kaduna actually seem to believe that there's some sort of communal cleansing going on.
That is difficult to prove. And because of so many things. But what is clear is that these attacks have been sustained. What is also clear is that in most cases they appear unprovoked, and then sometimes over excuses that are difficult to comprehend, so it's going to be difficult. And there's this mutual suspicion between the communities and settlers in those places, such that even when you are intervening, the intervention is viewed with suspicion. There is no, at that point, somehow the government brings its might to intervene and say, okay, we want this to stop, we want you to have a conversation. What we don't know is whether they show up in those conversations really willing to have a genuine conversation or a genuine shot at reconciliation, or just merely showing up because they've been summoned to do so. And that is why, for me, what would be more appropriate is a community-led initiative. Let us understand what is going on. Let us know the warring communities. Let us understand what these issues are and try to address them genuinely. And if we does establish that it is nothing coming from those two, then it could be a militia, that is carrying out this attack and masquerading under this mutual suspicion that is going on. And then whenever they happen, how sometimes you live around with somebody you think don't like you so much, and every time a misfortune befalls you, you think it definitely must be coming from that person because you already have a mutual suspicion. This is not, to assume that every party around it is innocent, but we must be thinking of a way of bringing this Southern Kaduna conflict to a complete halt.
We've seen renewed attack in recent times. Just over the weekend, we saw the attack on an Imo police station. We're seeing attacks in Zamfara, Katsina, and now Kaduna. A lot of people will say, what does this actually portray for us as the elections are coming up?
That's something we should worry about. Not necessarily, for me, not necessarily because of the elections, but even more so because of the elections, because what we are likely to see is that insufficient security forces will be deployed around all of these people seeking elections who have made themselves as more important than even the communities that they tend to. I mean, you need to see every time they move around their political activity, you see tons and tons of policemen or security apparatus attached to them, you know, to enable them move around those places and carry out their political activities. And what that then means is that it further depletes the number of security personnel that we have that would deal with the kind of issues we have. The last time, the Chief of Army Staff was telling us that the military is deployed in 32 out of 36 states of the Federation. I mean, that's akin to a war. And so when you begin to see this kind of thing, it worries you because at the end of the day, these guys understand that the security and the politicians are distracted with how to perpetuate themselves come to 2023, that they are not really paying attention because sometimes you get the sense that they are waking up to their responsibilities. They go after these guys and they're sustaining attack. After a while, it does feel like that momentum dies down until some kind of attack from those people to prompt them to wake up again. You would rather think that there will be some kind of sustained attack on these guys, you know, try to suppress them as much as possible. But when a little victory here and there and they showcase this on social media and everybody goes to sleep. And these guys go and regroup again and hit civilian targets. It's unfortunate.
You know, we're also seeing here, I don't know if it's like an explainer or a directional, the one about dangerous criminal spots to be wary of in Abuja and Lagos. It's quite tragic that we've come to that.
Yeah, I think every society has those kind of spots. Criminals have places where they are comfortable with for obvious reasons, nearness to places where they can disappear into and they will not be caught. Or, you know, and we know these places because even in our daily social interactions, you get to hear stories of how a particular kind of thing happened in a particular place. Women would tell you, these guys will snatch handbag at this spot every time, every other time. And it does seem like as long as nothing happens, if you pass there with a handbag, you get snatched. You know, so those spots have become notorious. Some places will tell you on this route, you're likely to jump on a one chance. Because it has happened over and over. The guys have mastered the route. They know their escape points. I mean, it leads to their escape routes and all of that. And so they just keep perpetuating it. It happens over and over again. And you begin to see that they choose these spots wisely. I mean, there are no police checkpoints, for instance. The response time between when securities can act on those places are not. It gives them some kind of latitude to do what they want to do and disappear. But what would be even amazing is that some of these places are so close to the city center, you'll be shocked. I mean, some of them are just U-turns under the bridge, and within a twinkle of an eye, they've struck, they've carried out the damage, and they have disappeared into the slums. So it's good that we are highlighting them so that the police cannot pretend that they don't know. At least we have done our own social responsibility by saying we have gathered that these particular spots are dangerous. It will be important that you highlight or beam your satellite on those places.
Some of them are actually sports without street lights.
Most times, actually.
Yes.
Most times, sports without street lights, sports where you don't have any of the CCTV cameras to review anything. I mean, and sometimes it's a sport where you have to make a U-turn. It's like moving away from the light, going into a tunnel, and then coming out. Within that split second, they've struck, taking whatever they want.
And some of these acts actually, these people that perpetrate these acts actually come in sophisticated cars.
Yeah.
Yes. They just, they're like a group, and then, some of them walk around like, nothing's happening, like they're taking a stroll, while the other people actually wait for them in the car, and then they attack and run into the car and they zoom off.
It's a well-organized crime, to be honest. They have scanners. People who can look you up and say, there is no how we are not getting this X amount of money from Zainab, no way. So they can tell,
Natural scanners.
So, when the scanners are comfortable that they can get something of you and they have tracked you sufficiently enough to know that you use a particular route, they just tell the guys, ABC and XYZ is on the way. This is the best time to strike, and that is it. And that is why the operation is so smooth, it's so fast, it's swift. And before you think of it, they've dislodged you of your valuables and they have disappeared. That's how they operate.
There are other very, very interesting stories. You would agree with me that the queues in town are not ceasing. It seems like they're accumulating.
I'm sure a lot of people are actually tired of hearing about the
You know.
fuel scarcity.
Everybody should be tired. Every rational human being, has a saturation point. We are all saturated, and painful because you're not sure what they just keep finding one silly excuse to explain away the untold hardship. Like I rounded off my production yesterday for 10:30. I went around a few places. At that time, I couldn't bear the queue. I was not prepared to do another black market because I've suffered untold hardship from one. I mean, I was just explaining what she had gone through after buying another, whether the adulterated fuel are still in circulation or not. One is not sure. I mean, I was tempted to buy one yesterday. The guy approached me. There were 3 of them. And I said, why do you need 3 people to sell me a 10-liter of black market? I wasn't comfortable. I was the only one at that spot. And then I looked at what they were carrying. It looked more like water than it is fuel. I said, no, worst case scenario, I would drive back to the office, leave the vehicle here, and get a place to rest my head. And that is the situation with several people. Imagine I was a woman in that condition. Imagine I was pregnant. Imagine I was a mother who probably needed medical attention, or a woman in labor with a car, ideally to rush her to the hospital, but there is no fuel. So imagine the contagion, imagine all of the kind of things we are going through, simply because of a supply side disruption, an imported inflation, more or less. Because, I mean, we know what the world is going through, but we somehow find a way to punish ourselves 10 times more than what the world is willing to dish us. So the excuses have become completely untenable. We have seen all kinds of apologies from the Deputy Petroleum Minister, because, the Petroleum Minister has also apologized, but it doesn't cut it. It doesn't take away the sufferings of people. It's the only apology Nigerians are willing to listen to is to wake up and see that there are fuels in each of the filling stations. Every other explanation offered simply just doesn't resonate with anybody.
But other countries are actually suffering the impact of, fuel scarcity.
They are suffering the impact in terms of price rise, but not scarcity of product. We have seen videos where they will tell you, oh, it used to be $1 something, now it's $2. But the point is, whilst they are sharing that video, they are the only vehicle in the fuel station. Today, are we not buying much more? I mean, last night, where I told you I had to change my mind, they were asking for 4,500 for a 10-liter. That is 450 naira per liter.
My goodness.
It's nowhere, I mean, it's way above whatever they had proposed by the government that we all shouted was ridiculous. This is way beyond it. I mean, which household can survive? For 10-liter, the max it will do for me is to take me to work and bring me back one day, and I'm done. Can I do a 10-liter every day for 5 or 6 days? I mean, what's the take home really? Even if I were to be the president, you can't sustain that type. And then you get home again, the energy crisis extends to your house. There's no light. You can't, with the heats are scorching. Yeah, you look for another 10-liter to power the generator for maybe 3-4 hours. I mean, who does that?
So much happening at the same time. Okay, let's take a look at other stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch is leading with politics. It says APC chairmanship. Al-Makura Adamu Yeri, others learn fate as aspirant screening holds today. And the writers there say governors initiate last-minute vote for consensus candidate. APC caucus hasn't endorsed any chairmanship aspirants, and this is according to the Senate. And you'd find other stories right at the top on page 25. Bad feel, marketers submit report on damages, await federal government compensation. There you go. You find other stories on page 21. Massive oil theft threatening external reserves revenue. This is according to the Monetary Policy Committee. You see also subsidy. FAAC meets today as NMPC deductions threaten states' allocations. We won't allow 242 billion naira deduction from March allocation. This is according to Delta State government. And then you'd find the other stories on page 2. Again, bandits raid Kaduna, Zamfara, kill 62, abduct 62, raise 70 houses. Quite a tragic one. And then there's a pictorial there that shows you Vice President Yemi Osinbajo and others during the inauguration of the Toyota Service Center in Oshodi, Lagos on Monday. You'd find other stories. Federal government scraps PCR test for fully vaccinated travelers, unvaccinated teenagers. Youths desert Oyo community as soldier drafted to maintain peace killed. You'd also see on page 25, Lagos, Ogun, Rivers lead as state's debts hit 6.43 trillion in 2021, and this is according to the DMO.
Okay, now let's talk about the lead story on APC chairmanship. You know, a lot of people are anticipating. They're really, really anticipating.
Yeah, to be or not to be. Well, they've said the screenings would happen today. Hopefully, they keep to their schedules. I mean, the dramas have gone full cycle. Sometimes people are beginning to even think that they have taken Nigerians for a complete ride. 1 minute you hear that it will happen, the next minute you get the impression that these guys are not prepared for anything. But if the screening happens today, it's a strong indication that the convention will go on the 26th, and maybe they can begin to move forward from all of the crises that have nearly brought the party to its knees. So everybody is looking forward to it. Let's see how that screening goes. My hunch is that all of the candidates that have been so named it does appear the criteria to emerge, and so I don't see the screening really taken down, except for technicalities. You know, I don't see the screening disqualifying any of them. I think the battle for the APC chair may have to go all the way to the convention.
Okay, now we also have a writer that says governors initiate last-minute move for consensus candidate.
On the one hand, it does. If you don't want a crisis, most time that is what you do. So it's not exactly anything too strange. I think the idea is to say, let us all agree on what is our best foot forward, you know, for strategic reasons. If they are able to agree on that, it saves everybody the resources. But I don't know whether that happens now. If you had already put in your 20 million for form and then they are asking you to say, let's agree on the consensus. Well, those agreements usually will come with some kind of compensations, I suppose. But it's a way of reducing the acrimony in the party. If it's a consensus, you just hold the convention just for formality's sake, or rather to reinforce what that consensus is, rather than throw the party into a full-blown selection process that most times, you know, leave a bitter pill after that process is done and a winner emerges. Others see themselves as losers, and in a bid to contest, you know, what they are lost. You know, some of them, not everybody has the capacity to take in lost sportsmanly. They may begin to get involved in anti-party activities or even protest in a manner that would further deepen the crisis in the party. I'm sure these are some of the things that they are looking at, and rather than go that route, if there is anything they can do to get these persons to agree on one person, I think they will do everything within their power to explore the option.
The Punch is also highlighting, you know, the issue of the fuel crisis, but I think this should be on the flip side. The marketers have submitted a report on the damages, you know, with regards to bad fuel, and it seems they want compensation from the government.
I don't know how that works. At first, when we got the report about the government paying compensation, I thought it would have been to Usaina and myself for the damages that we suffered. It does appear there is no template to collect our own damages. Maybe it's not severe enough. Maybe it's not big enough. You know, so I don't understand the rationale behind these people submitting anything for any kind of damage claim. Or however they came about what that list is. Every time I see these things, my initial instinct is some kind of arrangement to further defraud the Nigerian state of resources that it is struggling, you know, to put together to serve other basic, important public needs. So it's difficult to comprehend. I am not casting aspersion on what they are asking for, but I don't understand what they are asking for. Nigerians do not understand what these damages are to marketers, and how they even came about what that damage is in the first place.
Really very interesting.
Okay, we also have, a story linked to the fuel issue saying massive oil thefts threatening external reserves and revenue. We've actually stressed the need for, Nigeria to, look at other options, especially in the non-oil revenue, and we're seeing this now.
You know, the Nigerian oil sector problem is such a plague. This was by the central bank governor yesterday at the briefings, the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, where we were talking about accruing reserves and the challenges of even building up our estate. I mean, you can't imagine that oil is selling over $110 and we are not celebrating. It's a windfall ideally, but not for Nigeria. You know why? For us to be able to count it a blessing, we must be able to sell a certain quantity, of crude at a certain price and then buy less to see it as a windfall. But that's not happening. We are buying more, we are spending more on fuel imports because of rising costs of international crude prices. And even at that, even what was traditionally our quota, not what you now need to do, not what you now need to supply to close off for the gap of Russia and Ukraine, what was traditionally the quota we are supposed to do allocated to us, which is about 1.65 million barrels per day. We are struggling today. We are doing about 1.2 million barrels per day, some 450 less. And all we hear is stolen crude. And you begin to wonder how are this theft, really perpetuated? Who are responsible? Because for you to be able to tap into the crude line and steal from it, you must have very sophisticated gadgets. It's not like stealing a toy. And for you to even be able to sell those crude, you must also have sophisticated networks. So when you steal the crudes, you steal them where? You obviously take them to a refinery, and crudes you are able to test crude as with diamonds to tell that this particular one comes from this particular origin. So what kind of international collaborations do we have with Interpol or any other relevant agency for that matter to be able to track the destination of this theft and have some kind of collaborations to either shut down those places or prevent them from becoming collaborators with people who steal our common patrimony and pass them over? I mean, it's terrible. You know what it means that as big as this country with all the infrastructure it has, satellites and the seals, people can, in broad daylight, walk into something and fetch from our common patrimony and dispose them, and we can't track them, and all we do is to sit somewhere and complain about how that theft is really impacting us. It's difficult to understand. It looks like a collaboration beyond just mere theft. It looks like something that has the blessing of people from high and mighty for it to succeed really to the level where we are now making a public apology of what's going on.
Really very interesting stories. Let's take a look at some more on the Nigerian Tribune. You see the story about defection. Court sacks 20 Cross River lawmakers. And the writers there say, we are not aware of any judgment sacking us. This is according to the speaker. Court strikes out Omahi's motion to stop execution of judgment. Issue certificate of return to Igariwe. Odogu now, PDP tells INEC. And you see some more stories on the top on page 6 and page 22. CBN retains MPR at 11.5%, says Russia-Ukraine war poses risk to global economy. You'd also see the story about bandits killed 23, burned 70 houses in 2 Kaduna local governments. Government declares 24-hour curfew. Police confirm killing of 16 in Zamfara. This is one killing too many. This is according to the Christian Association of Nigeria. You'd also see other stories on the Nigerian Tribune. OAU-VC, Ife Indigenes Go Fetish. Protest block major roads. You find details of that story on page 11. And then you see also the story about Imo security crisis. What I Told the President by Ozodimma. Anambra rulers decry Obiano's ill treatment in EFCC custody. Plane carrying 132 passengers crashes in China. You'd also see the story about APC convention protest over consensus candidate for national secretary. And the writers there say no position taken on chairmanship, Senate caucus. governors have resolved differences. This is according to the governor of Nasarawa State, and also screening of aspirants to commence today.
Okay, now let's take a look first of all at this particular story on page 11 that talks about Anambra rulers decrying Obiano's ill treatment in EFCC custody.
Well, I don't know where they got that from. Maybe they are private to some other information that we don't know. But I mean, if you are picked up by the security agency for questioning over alleged misappropriation of funds, it's not going to be a tea party, is it? I mean, they will not serve you the best of food. They will not take you to Transcorp Hilton either. It's going to be at an interrogation room. However, that translates into a maltreatment is what I don't understand. Maybe I'm not privy to the same information as they do. But one of the video leaked saw him putting on a boxers like somebody who just walked out of the gym, and he was having bottled water and looked somewhat relaxed. You know, I've not seen him like that. I've always seen him with a dark goggle shade. For the first time, I had a peep into his real frame. I mean, that is just being sarcastic, but the point is, if the security outfits deem it necessary to pick you up the very day you signed off to answer questions for how you have managed the public funds, it's not going to be a tea party, bottom line. I would rather that the monarchs should concern themselves with whether or not the allegations are true. Otherwise, I think Obiano, from his background financially, and even the position he has had as governor, has sufficient arsenals and capacity to defend himself. I doubt he would need the help of the monarchs to demand for his rights should the need arise. I mean, he can afford the best lawyers in this country.
You know, the one closely related about the defection, court sacks 20 Cross River lawmakers. It seems there's a lot of drama coming from that part of the country.
We are all watching some of the dramas that I imagine, especially as it affects defection, because there had been interpretations in the past. There had been precedents, for instance, with the Zamfara State's case and others where the court had to make landmark judgments with those regards. And the case of the Ebonyi State governor came up, and that he's running helter-skelter to save his life. And now the case of River State, where the governor and all members of the party defected. I think the River State governor called his own a certain name. He didn't call it a defection. He didn't call it a defection. But it's important that people are testing these cases because, as a friend was explaining to me, that the Supreme Court gets the opportunity to reverse itself. But the reversal has to start from a lower court. In other words, you could challenge the Supreme Court's previous pronouncement if you have new facts, or you have some kind of analysis to suggest that the Supreme Court erred in his own judgment because it relied on something that was technically wrong or something. You know, these are legal jargons that are best explained by lawyers. And so once you can review those judgments and find those loopholes, you can then go through the process of challenging these things so that when it gets back to them and they look at what they had done before vis-a-vis what the kind of prayers you are asking for and the new information that you are bringing on the table, then they will have the opportunity to say, what we relied on when we made these pronouncements in the past were not sufficient because we were not privy to this perspective, and on the basis of this new information, this is the new position of law, which then becomes a reference material. So it would be nice to see how this ends, because I think the politicians have become notorious for just jumping everywhere. If the rains are becoming too much for the umbrella to hold, they move into another place and they start sweeping the ground. And you would want them to remain in a place and cultivate an ideology. And so we can say you are of a populist philosophy or a socialist philosophy or a capitalist. Let us begin to identify them with those kind of things. And then people who are of the same mindset will say, I am tagging along with Husseina because she represents this philosophy and I buy into them. Rather than wake up one day and say, I know the umbrella is torn, it can no longer prevent the sun. Let us move into another place.
All right. Now, at first, we actually saw, 16 lawmakers, being sacked in Ebonyi State, and now we're seeing, 20 in Cross River. Did this particular case, that's in Ebonyi, did it set off a chain reaction, and will we see more of these, sacks of lawmakers?
It will definitely set off because there had been a precedent. We exist in the same country. You know, the way life works is everything has a way of setting up something somewhere else. How would I put it? If a woman wakes up, let's say in Kaduna, and challenges something and gets a favorable judgment, the woman sitting in Ogun will say, oh, if this woman in Kaduna has succeeded, we exist in the same country, we are exposed to the same laws, I could as well challenge it on the precedence of what happened in Kaduna and also get a favorable judgment. So that's what happens. The moment the Ebonyi State governor's case got that pronouncement, every other person who was within that purview started getting the impression that, oh, this looks like a window, and now this is the best time for us to jump on this thing and see what we can get from it. Largely because of the interpretations that by our own democratic system, votes are for the party. They are not for the individual. And so if you defect from the party, you lose the privilege, you can't move with a mandate that the people had given to the party because they didn't give that mandate to you. And I think it is on that premise that people are strongly pursuing this so that we got to a level where these issues can be concluded once and for all.
Very interesting.
Okay, now let's move on to another paper. We'll take This Day newspaper next. We have the lead story there that talks about 4 days to APC convention. Buni harmonizes subcommittees. Screening starts today. And, we've actually seen this, in other papers. And we also have more stories talking about Saraki, Ministers of State's position will be occupied by youths under 40 in my presidency. That's what Saraki is saying. Details of that on page 33. And then, we've seen the defection, case. Again, court sacks 2 reps, 18 Cross River Assembly members. Imoke Hill's judgment and state government appeals file stay of execution. And right at the top, we have Emefiele saying unprecedented oil theft affecting economy. CBN leaves MMR unchanged at 11.5%, predicts moderation in food prices, urges NNPC to ensure adequate fuel supply to check price arbitrage by marketers, and says Infraco up and running, secures 250 billion naira in bridge finance. And at the bottom there, we have a story that talks about EFCC recovering 152 billion naira, $386 million, and records 2,220 convictions in 1 year.
I'm really interested in that
one.
Story. It seems they're doing their job, aren't they?
I would like to think so, and I hope so. Maybe we have moved away from getting conviction on the pages of the newspaper. Those days they would get our colleagues around places where they will swoop and pick on somebody without preparing the charge cases on that person. And the person comes in and they hold the person for 2-3 days and they have nothing to take to court. And the person gets a bail, then they move in again. It was becoming a Nollywood of some sorts. It felt like they just enjoy seeing themselves on the pages of the paper. But the way we know them world over, anti-graft agencies would have done sufficient groundwork, established sufficient grounds that this person is not going to escape justice. And so they move in for you as the last resort. And once they do that, you can be very sure that there is no pulling out of their grip because they have so much information, they have garnered so much evidence to nail you. If that is what they have been doing in recent times, then it will be nice. I mean, but we could do more. If you look around the Nigerian states, it appears that what we are doing is just scratching off of the surface. There are so many people with questionable political history who are still throwing themselves off for election now. You know, I mean, with so much questions to ask her about their past. They had not bothered to clear their name. They just go to the courts and ask for perpetual injunction not to be tried. In other cases, they'll be jumping around for political activities now, but the moment they're moving on them, they come up with a POP tomorrow and we're walking stick the next day. They can no longer breathe. They can't, their legs have issues. They need to see a foreign medical doctor. You know, so it's crazy. I mean, how the system works, but one would really love an anti-graft agency that is deep on intelligence, that is deep on, intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing. Because you can't perpetrate evil without leaving all kinds of footprints around, either from where you spend the money to people who benefit from it to how you take, these are all several layers of footprints that we leave. So if we get more intelligent people into these places that prize themselves in seeking hard facts, hard evidence, then we'll be making more progress, and maybe the 158 billion or thereabout that we are talking about will be in quadruple, maybe because we need to be recovering trillions to be funding our budget, not just hundreds of billions as we have seen.
There's also this one on This Day newspaper. It seems Saraki is so sure of becoming Nigeria's president that he's foreseeing rather, the ministers of state's position will be occupied by youths under 40 under his presidency.
He's appealing to a demography, possibly.
Let me tell you what I feel. I feel sad because I'm also going to use statistics to respond to Saraki. I feel sad because Saraki got the best of opportunities in his life under 40, not as a minister of state. How old was he when he was governor? When he was special advisor to the president, Olusegun Obasanjo has left power for this man has done 8, the other one did 5, for nearly 14 years. How old was he when he became the Senate president? And you think as a bargaining chip what you offer us and we should be excited about is Minister of State, when the reality is that in more sophisticated and advanced democracies, people in their 40s are presidents. So why Minister of State? You are still telling us that, it does look like you guys are not ready, but to encourage you, and that is why when you go to some parties, the youth leader is in his 70s. And he calls himself a youth, and so you wonder at what age they ever become an adult. It underscores the thinking of people. The largest voting bloc will just sit idle, and what they need to wait for is for you to decide what you think is good for them. I would rather that we are prompting people. How old are the bank MDs, by the way? Have we bothered asking ourselves? People who sit on trillions of naira, who made more sophisticated, more complicated decisions than some of the people who call ministers in this cabinet, or some of the people who call governors in this cabinet, who can't even read a financial position, who don't even understand the implications of what they do. So how old are they? How old are some of the captains of industries of some of the most forceful? How old was Dangote when he started off everything that we are celebrating today? And that we have to wait for a minister of just imagine, a very entrepreneurial person waking up and they say, no, you're Minister of State for Women Affairs. We are compensating you, are coming up. So at what age should the youth begin to think of, how can you be appropriating such kind of things to people who constitute the largest voting blocs, who should be deciding the future of this country? I feel like it's a let off. In his own estimation, he thinks he's offering something good, but I feel it's a complete, how do I put it? It denigrates everything that we stand for. At 40, you should be ready to conquer the world and not just be a minister of state.
I like that. You should be ready to conquer the world at 40.
All right, let's quickly run through the Nation newspaper. Government cancels COVID-19 PCR tests. Resurgence still likely, and details of that on page 28. We also have court sacks 20 Cross River lawmakers over defection. Obiano's arrest not political, says EFCC. We also have just below the nameplate APC chair Adamu Al-Bakura Mustafa Akume Musa for screening, and drama over Akpanu Dodehe at CECPC meeting. We also have JAM fixes UTME registration deadline for Saturday. Police confirm 16 killed in Zamfara. And the lead story there talks about South PDP governors demand presidential tickets. Obaseki absent at meeting, that's a rider. Another one says we can't stop Atiku and Saraki. Others says party. And then we also have MPC downgrades growth forecast to 3.24%. Rates remain unchanged. And below the pictorial there, you can actually see a pictorial there of houses raised in the community, one of the communities in Jama'ah local government in Kaduna State by gunmen. And then we have 23 killed, houses burned in Kaduna, gunmen's attack. And right on the footnote there, schools shot in Imo over gunmen attack threats, and more protests over OAUVC.
Very, very interesting stories. I think the story about COVID-19 PCR tests seems to be on almost virtually all of the papers this morning. Some would say we should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah, well, still better late than never. I think we saw, was it on Monday or towards the end of last week when the British Airways, I think, and Virgin Atlantic saying they would no longer demand for those to get passengers on their plane. I mean, you see how advanced democracies work. It had to take, players within the industry to say, we are changing strategy, I'm happy that people are also watching. The problem I have is that most times we have to sit and wait for advanced democracies to say we are headed in a particular direction before we all wake up. Because if you ask me, some of the complications that we have introduced into international travel have become extremely complicated. They look to me to be completely exploitating. It doesn't feel like they are being implemented for the right reasons. I was billed to travel sometimes in January, and somewhere in between it was cancelled. But what I went through, even before the cancellation, felt like complete exploitation. I've been fully vaccinated. To be insisting that I go through a process like that felt to me like the government and all the agencies involved were more interested in the money than they were in checking any kind of thing, So it was a question. You always get text messages, reminding you that you need to show up for vaccination, you need to make payment. I mean, to go to Ghana here, you have to run about 4 tests. And the cost of running those 4 tests is the equivalent of the cost of going to Ghana and returning. What sense does it make? So it complicates foreign travel. It complicates, it increases the cost. And like I said, it doesn't really change anything. Now that we have seen a downward trend in all of what is happening, I think it is time to review some of these things that are put in place. And I commend the task force from the federal government for also joining in that. I'm sure that other nationals will also reciprocate by also taking decisions to remove these things once and for all.
It seems like a lot of the world is moving away, from COVID-19, and it seems Russia and Ukraine war. Nobody's talking about COVID anymore,
But we
except
still
for China.
We actually still have, Nigeria saying that resurgence is still likely.
Yeah, I mean, there is no ruling it out. We have seen more than anything. What we have seen more than anything is, since COVID in 2020, is that the world is far more connected than we can imagine. I mean, it started in Wuhan, and then we were talking about the U.S., and lo and behold, we had a full-blown case in Nigeria. We also had to shut down. It showed how you cannot afford to ignore anything going on in any part of the world. Worst case, even with Nigerians that are broadly and widely traveled. So yeah, if there is still a chance that something is happening somewhere, it's important that we're keeping an eye to it. But what we are saying is, over this period of time, we have a lot of us, a good number of us, especially those who are engaged in this international travel, had to go through the vaccination exercise. They are mostly fully vaccinated. And so it does mean that even if they get caught, the impact will not be as severe as what we saw some 2 years ago. And then people have also learned the act of, I still walk around places in Abuja where you can't access certain buildings without your nose mask on. So the precautions are still there, maybe not as heightened as it was 1-2 years ago, but people have adopted these things as a way of life, and they are moving on with it. And these things will not disappear once and for all. We will keep evolving, and the medications will also keep evolving until such a time that COVID is not such a threat anymore.
Okay. Now, we've also seen the story of schools shut in Imo State over gunmen attack threats, where, schools received, letters of an impending attack.
The Imo case is pathetic. I think it was yesterday or thereabout that the president was directing more security to Imo, to forestall the breakdown, because we've been seeing attack on the homes of targeted citizens of the states. Now they are hitting at public institutions, asking them not to take national anthem. That's an attack against the state. And parents, who would want to protect their walls are rushing. And to think that this notice is being served on schools within the metropolis is even more frightening. It's something we need to nip in the bud. It doesn't serve anybody any good to cause those kind of disruption. It's not like they are offering them any alternative education. You are just saying you don't want this to happen. You want to bring the state to its nail and make it look like a banana republic. And so stakeholders from that state need to wake up and nip it in the bud, like we are saying in the case of Kaduna and the rest of that. These things are not faceless. If we are really ready to unearth them, we can unearth the perpetrators of this kind of distortion. And no states can move forward, can make any kind of meaningful progress with this level of distortion. One day you wake up, you say students can't go to school on Monday, and another day you wake up, you tell yourself you are sitting at home, and then people have to comply because the state doesn't appear to have the wherewithal to protect people. So if people decide to engage these people by disobeying those instructions and they show up, as we have seen in the past, they are attacked. Their shops are burnt, their goods are destroyed, and the state doesn't come to their aid, doesn't provide any kind of compensation, and doesn't stop those attacks from happening. So it's a double whammy for citizens in the state. The state, this time I'm talking about the federal government, and the states have to find a way to reinforce their presence and assure people that they are the only authority in town. You cannot have a government within a government.
Well, seems we're going to come to the end of the review this morning. Thank you, Mr. Sunday Michael, for talking to us on the program.
Thank you.
When a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that